Okay, let's okay, they're already saying hi, Summer. Here, come on, go say hi. Where is there we go. Okay. So okay, there please say people are saying hi. All right. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And Mhm. Okay. That's okay. I'll go there now. I'll start already. Bye. Mwah. Okay. Bye, baby girl. Okay. Uh, so where were we? Diba? Distracted. Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to yet another lockdown lecture. This one on creativity, innovation, and all those corny cliches. So today's lecture, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be about creativity, innovation, and all those other corny cliches. And we're doing this because, um, well, it's easy to say, or it's easy to to point out or to attribute creativity to artists, okay, to designers. And a lot of people, sadly, say that they are not creative. Uh, I'm not artistic. I'm not creative. I'm not like this. And the worst part of all, okay, and it becomes institutionalized. It becomes a truth. It becomes a reality that implants in the mind is that if you are not in the creative fields, if you are not an artist or a designer, if you're a mathematician, an engineer, an accountant, uh, then you are not creative. And that's the part that really becomes a problem. That it's that institutionalization. It's that implanting that I am not creative. If I am a businessman, if I'm a mathematician, if I'm a statistician, I am not creative. And that's what we're going to be trying to do here as well, is really dispelling that kind of thinking that I am not creative, or I have to be an artist to be creative, or if you are not good at an art, you are not creative. Okay, so what's it all about? First of all, let's get this out of the way. Creativity is not artistry. Okay, uh, you do not need to be an artist. You do not need to be a designer, a painter, a musician to be creative. Anytime that you are trying to solve a problem, okay, and remember, everybody is always trying to solve a problem. Anytime that you are trying to solve a problem, you are actually engaging in some sort of creativity. So on that level alone, on that respect alone, you are already uh, being creative. If you are if you're a lawyer and you're trying to win a case, you're trying to present, you're looking for which laws am I going to use to help defend my client, you are actually being creative. A mathematician who's trying to solve a complex problem and trying to see how am I going to put this together is being creative. So again, it's not about being an artist. So let's take that out of the equation immediately. Artistry is not necessary to be creative, although artists are by nature creative. Okay, so it's not the one true the other way around. Artistry is creativity, but creativity is not artistry. So going on, what is creativity? And creativity is a phenomenon whereby something new and somehow valuable is formed. The created item may be intangible or a physical object. Now, this is a very uh, simplistic definition, but I'm going to hold on to it. Okay, I'm gonna hold on to this definition, uh, because there's some, when it's simple, it's easy to understand, and more importantly, there's this kind of nice word here that I like: somehow valuable. Okay, somehow valuable, and this concept of value is going to be appearing repeatedly in one form or another throughout this lecture. So creativity is where something new and somehow valuable is formed, which means, again, if it does not have value, if it is not worth something to someone, whether to you or to somebody else, then it is not actually being creative. Okay? So let's move on. So when we're talking about creativity, there are two major components about creativity. One is this concept of originality. One is, and the other is the concept of functionality. Okay, so originality, it's novel and unique. It's not an extension of something that already exists. Inspiration from an existing model or method. Okay, and then functionality, your idea must produce results. Okay, so it's both of these things. Uh, let's pause for a bit. Does something original or does something creative always have to have a function? Yes. Even if it's a painting, it has a function. It must produce results. If you're a painter and you're trying to think, okay, how do I capture the how do I capture the brightness or the heat of the sun in a painting? So you use paints, you use lines, you use brushing techniques, and that's the result. So there is a functionality. Don't think that something, because it's something is just created, that it just stays it just hangs in a vacuum. All objects of creativity are original, which means that again it it is created. Okay, it is made to exist, and then it is functional. It produces a sort of result. Now, when we're talking about creative people, okay, now remember, everyone is creative, but not everyone is creative. Creative people manifest these three particularly distinctive characteristics. They are energetic, they are intelligent, and they are disciplined. And some of you are probably saying, okay, check, check, check. And some of you are like, siya, dalawa lang. Something like that. Take a step back. Look at it. Why are creative people energetic? Creative people are energetic because it takes energy to be creative. It takes brain power. It takes hand power. You have to move. You cannot be creative. You cannot create if you're not going to expend energy. See, that's a difference now between creative people and not creative people. Uncreative people are tamad. They go with the cliche. They go with the ordinary. They go with the default because that doesn't need energy anymore. Creative people will find a way, and that requires energy. Because that also requires energy, it requires you to think. Do you have to be a summa cum laude? No. But you have to use your brain. Your mind has to work. So again, if you are tamad or you're lazy to move your head as well, your brain as well, then you cannot be creative. And there is discipline. And what's this discipline about? Discipline is about sticking to the process. It's about using techniques. Creative people are actually not kalat. They're not burara. They're more disciplined because there are processes that they undergo and that they go through. Whether it is having your coffee or thinking while you're in the toilet or having a smoke, that's a process. And that process is not, if you deviate from the process, if you destroy, if you remove that process, that that creativity starts to collapse. So there is that sense of discipline. There are people that need to start with a sketch before they can paint. There are people that need to arrange all of their materials first or all of their ingredients before they can begin. And that's what we're talking about, discipline. So all creative people are energetic, they're intelligent, and they're disciplined. Let's look at the chat window if there's anybody so far. We're good, ladies and gents? Okay. So this is just an additional quote just for us to really understand this concept of creativity. Creativity is the fountainhead of human civilizations. All progress and innovation depend on our ability to change existing thinking patterns, break with the present, and build something new. So all progress and innovation, all. It is incumbent in this concept of if you want to create something new, you have to be creative. Change comes from being creative. Let's not talk about positive change first or negative change. It's all, but there's always a sense of creativity involved. If you want to create something new, or if you want there to be something new, we have to break with the present and build that something. We have to change the way that we're thinking, and the only way that you can do that is by being creative. Okay, civilizations were built and of course eventually destroyed by creativity. Okay, so uh, Andy Trich, who said that quote, described creativity in four in a matrix of four processing modes: emotional, cognitive, deliberate, and spontaneous. And this is fun, and I want you to kind of think of where you are or what you do or when it's it that you do things. Let's start with what's called deliberate and cognitive. Okay, deliberate and cognitive is also known as expert brilliance. It's characterized by a great amount of knowledge about the subject and combine their skills and capabilities to prepare a course of action to achieve something. This is the type of creativity when people work at a very long time in a particular area. Okay, I got the term, deliberate and cognitive. This is this is you know teachers are usually like this. Experts in the field, so they do something just like that. It actually does not entail a huge amount of brain power because their their years of experience uh, just kicks into gear. Um, Muscle memory, for instance, if you ride a motorcycle for, if you've been riding a motorcycle for years or driving a car for years, there are some things that you do automatically. uh, avoiding avoiding collisions, weaving in, trying to find a route, trying to find a better way, and you're just doing this. Your mind is just snapping into place. uh, Veteran filmmakers, veteran lawyers, veteran scientists, it just kicks into place. So that's that first stage, expert brilliance. The next is deliberate and emotional. Ah, so now this is not just technical, it's not cognitive, it's now emotional. The aha moment. Creativity is influenced by one's state of emotions. And the result is always a balanced product of deliberate emotional thinking and logical actions. And it's a type of creativity that happens to people at random moments. So, uh, how does this work? Deliberate because you actually know what you're doing. This is the logical part, the deliberate part. This is where the expertise comes out, the experience. Um, I know naman how to draw, or I know how to make a film. I know how to shoot a photograph. But how your mood, how you feel, how your emotions are at that moment, at that exact moment, uh, affect what it is that you're going to create. So sometimes you just have this literally a moment of brilliance. I was like, oh, totally inspired. Oh yeah, let's use that word, inspired. And sometimes you're just feeling bleh. So, sige, mema, or and and again, that's the emotional part. That's really doing it or not doing it for you. Okay. The third type is what's called spontaneous and cognitive. Now, this is a variation uh, on deliberate and emotional. Okay, spontaneous and cognitive. This is now eureka. Now, what's the difference between the eureka moment and the aha moment from the previous one? This type of creativity happens when one has knowledge to get the job done but requires inspiration or a hint to walk towards the right path. This type of creativity usually happens at the most inconvenient time. Spontaneous and cognitive creativity takes place when the conscious mind stops working and unconscious mind gets a chance to work. Okay. Eureka, for those that aren't familiar, is attributed to Archimedes, who discovered or understood the concept of mass. This is physics, in ancient Greece. Who understood the concept of mass when he was taking a bath, when he sat in the bathtub and the water overflowed, and it just made sense. This is how you compute for mass. This is how you calculate for mass. Eureka, and he was supposed to be running down the streets of Athens. Uh, Naked, because he was just so excited. Eureka, I found it. That's what eureka means. And so this is you know what to do. Again, notice the cognitive part. You know what to do. You know how to build the house. You know how to solve the problem. You know how to how to frame the shot. But when your conscious mind stops working, that's when the unconscious takes over. And then bam, it just hits you. So this will happen when you're about to fall asleep. Sometimes you're on the crapper, you're having a smoke, you're driving, you're nowhere near the set, or you're nowhere near your notebooks, or it just hits you. You're commuting and you're like, oh no, am I there? That's it, that's it, that's it, that's it. So you know, not the most convenient of creativity modes, truth be told. Okay. And the last is what's called spontaneous and emotional. And this is supposed, not, I don't want to say that it's the highest order, but this is the one that happens the least. This is the one that really takes time to simmer and happens. And it's called the epiphany, that enlightenment moment. It's a sudden realization of something. It's responsible for scientific breakthrough, religious and philosophical discoveries, and allows the enlightened person to look at a problem or situation with a different and deeper viewpoint. And you cannot work on this. It happens. It's moment of clarity. There, that's one way of putting it. It's a moment of clarity when suddenly everything just makes sense. And it's that making sense, and it's a combination of things that you know and things that you didn't know and things that you understood in your heart. It's how you feel and how you think, and all of that just comes together and it happens. I cannot, or nobody can tell you when it's going to happen, and uh, nobody can tell you how it's going to happen, but it does. And when it does, and it just brings you to a deeper understanding or a deeper realization of certain things. this is this is what we want to achieve. This is where we want to get to when we're trying to be creative. It's that epiphany. Okay. Do we have questions? Am I good so far? So far so good. Okay. Okay, no questions. Very good. So when we're talking about creativity, there are two distinct aspects of it. Okay, there is the creative process, which is creating the connections. Okay, and creative thinking, which is recognizing those connections. Now, uh, this has to happen simultaneously. Some people are creative or think they're creative or are trying to be creative simply by creating connections, and that's fine. Okay, and then there are people that just see connections but don't actually create them. These two have to happen not simultaneously, but they have to happen. They have to both exist uh, for us to be creative. Not just the process, the creating the connections, but the thinking, which is recognizing the creations. Because creativity is not just about being artistic. This creative process, this is just artistry. Brilliance comes from the thinking also, in seeing, in understanding how things work together. Okay? So uh, some people are already here, but they're worried because they cannot do this. That's fine, because this is actually what's going to fuel this creative thinking. This is what's going to now fuel the process. All right, let's look at that. Let's talk about creative thinking first. Okay, creative thinking is a process. It's a way, okay, to look at and solve problems from a different perspective, avoiding orthodox solutions and thinking outside the box. So for instance, if I was being creative in a sense when I asked you to, if instead of just asking you to describe yourself or describe your personality or describe who you are, I asked you to draw a sandwich. And then from your side as well, you were engaging in critical thinking because now you were creative thinking rather, because now you're trying to say, okay, who am I? What am I? And how do I represent that in a sandwich? What sandwich is me? What ingredients do I put into a sandwich that reflect what I am and who I am? And um, in one on one hand, Elka, for instance, said that she was really basing it on a wafer and in an ice cream sandwich, which means that that ice cream sandwich for her represented her on so many different levels, emotionally, physically, you know, um, psychologically. It probably triggers a lot of good memories, childhood and adulthood. It also includes, of course, tequila, and let's try not to judge her so much now, but diba? Yeah, tequila. Uh, and then Danielle, she said, I'm a simple person. I'm pretty straightforward. Hers was a burger, but it includes ingredients that not everybody likes. So, so you're already being creative. It wasn't even about the drawing just yet. It was, how do I interpret this? How do I interpret something in another mode? And that's what we were engaging in when we were doing critical thinking. So if you want to be, or if you are a creative thinker, creative thinkers manifest these six uh, characteristics. They value ideas, they explore options, okay? They embrace ambiguity. And ambiguity is that vagueness, it's that gray area. They creative thinkers do not like black and white. They want gray, they want form, they want cloud shapes, not straight lines, because that ambiguity gives them room to think and to grow and to be creative. Creative thinkers celebrate the offbeat. Creative thinkers actually like it when something is strange and different. Because again, gets nila. Uh, Creative thinkers get each other, get when something is being creative. And so this, when it's offbeat, when it's different, they like it. And and they connect the unconnected. So they, who would have thought that you can connect a sandwich to a personality development or personality assessment test? But a creative person says, wait, okay, no, draw a sandwich. Draw a sandwich and then tell me what you are based on the ingredients in your sandwich. So they connect things that are supposedly unconnected. The person that invented the selfie stick, for all that is, it's called as one of world's man's worst inventions. It's brilliance because somebody connected a stick and a clip together, or tried to replicate the hand, the arm, to create a selfie stick. Okay, and the thing is, the most important thing is creative thinkers do not fear failure. They try. And if they fail, it's okay. You learn from your failure and you move on. Okay? So these things, valuing ideas, exploring options, embracing ambiguity, celebrating the offbeat, connecting the unconnected, and not fearing failure. These are the characteristics of a creative thinker. And creative thinking involves two major uh, processes or dimensions. And one is what's called divergent thinking, and the opposite of that is convergent thinking. So, uh, divergent thinking, the most simple way of looking at it is exploring possibilities, trying things out, diverging, opening up. And convergent thinking is once you've diverged, once you've opened up and explored, you pick from this and you bring them together. You converge. You decide what to do. Now, this is very simple to look at, okay? But do not think for a moment that this is always a final thing. A creative thinker is going to say, okay, what are my options? What are my ingredients in the refrigerator? Okay, let's start with that. And because now it's lockdown season, all of us have had to do this. You look in your refrigerator, you look in the pantry, you look at what's left over, you look at the can of sardinas, okay, and you explore the different possibilities. Then you select, you bring things together, and you say, okay, I will now create a um, sinigang na sardinas. Why? Because I have a little gulay, I have a little sampalok, and I have the can of sardines. Let's put this together. Let's see what happens. Okay? Let's see what happens. A creative person is not going to fear failure, right? So you're going to push through with your sinigang na sardinas and hope to God that it works out. Okay? If it doesn't, di mamatay sa gutom. Diba? But that's what I know. So again, you explore and then you bring together. You decide what to do. Another way of looking at it is a divergent thinker. You have a question, you have a goal, okay, you have a challenge out there, and then you explore. You go out, back, okay, and you try some things out. And then when you get to the convergent thinking, you're now reaching an answer. You are now trying to put things together. Again, for instance, fact. Uh, you know that hindi bagay ang sinigang tsaka tinapay, right? So which means that if all you have in the house is bread because you've run out of rice, fact, you will not bring out the sinigang and do something. But you can have a caldereta, or you can have an afritada, or you can open a can of spicy tuna. Diba? So and when you're diverging, you're exploring. When you're converging, you're using facts, you're using input. You're going to try things out, and then you're going to achieve that answer. So I also said that there is a difference between creative and critical thinking. They're different. Okay, they exist in the same domain, huh? They exist in the same domain. I'm not saying that they're separate and you put critical thinking around, but look at it in this way. Creative thinking is about imagining, inventing, changing, designing, and creating. Critical thinking is about analysis, breakdowns, comparisons, listings, and rankings. It's more technical. It's more, what's this, cognitive in nature. When you put these two together, this is problem solving. This you can think of as your divergent thinking. This is your convergent thinking. When you bring them together, you are solving problems. So let's stop thinking about technical knowledge, critical knowledge is on one side, and creativity is on the other end. No, always bring the two together, because it is the merging of your creativity and the critical thinking that comes together. So they are different, but they are also part of the same thing, right? Question so far? Are we good? Let's look in the chat window before I continue. Okay, still no additional. All right. So I will move on. So what causes creativity? When does creativity happen? How does it happen? Creativity, creativity is caused by confidence. Okay, you need confidence, and without confidence, you cannot be creative. So that has to happen. You have to be able to question without fear. Next is creativity is caused by observation. Remember that it is not just about making the patterns, it is about seeing connections, seeing how things connect and work together, how things can happen. Okay? You also have to have humility. And this humility comes from understanding that you don't know everything, that you need to explore, you need to experiment, that you need to try. Okay? Because when you're doing something out of habit, because you've done it a million times, that's no longer creativity. Okay? And then there's mindfulness. And mindfulness comes from that understanding of how you think. You have to understand the processes. You have to understand how your mind works to be able to be creative, how your body works, how your hands will move. So you're thinking about how you think. That's part of creativity. Then there's also curiosity. You cannot be creative if you are not curious, if you cannot explore, if you do not experiment. And of course, that comes from confidence, right? Being without fear. Then you have to be resourceful. If you always have everything that you need, you cannot be creative. This is a shout out, for instance, to my kids, to my film majors. You know, all of them, all of them have had their actors back out on them on the last minute, on the shooting day. Their creativity comes in because now they have to come up with a way to change the story or to fix the story or to achieve their goals, even after their actors have backed out. That's resourcefulness, finding a way when there is no way. And that entails energy. If you don't have energy, if you don't expend energy, forget it. It's just not going to happen. Okay? And that energy has to lead to action, because you don't just think about creativity, you have to do it. So creativity has to be made, you have to move, you have to explore, you have to create. Okay? So these things are what causes creativity. Right? What's next? Now let's talk about the process. Okay? Let's talk about the creative process. You go through this whenever you're undergoing a requirement, a problem-solving process. You actually go through what is called the creative process, and it's a 5-step process: preparation, incubation, insight, evaluation, and implementation. And notice, for those that tried out the photography activity, you actually went through this. You prepared. First, you got yourself ready. What is within arm's reach? What do I photograph? Let me get my camera. Am I going to use on my phone? Am I going to use something fancier? Let me get my tools. So that's your preparation. You prepare your setting, you prepare your object, you prepare your lights, or you prepare your angle. Then you incubate. And when you're incubating, what you're actually doing is you're letting it simmer. That's the concept, simmer. niluluto ninyo, pinapakulo ninyo. And in that incubation, it's like, okay, how do I do this? How do I, you start looking at things from different angles, you start to explore. And then insight. Okay, yeah, yes, okay, we'll do this. Oh, I only have 2 minutes. Oh, I have 1 minute left. Oh, I don't have a nice object. I don't have a nice cam, whatever. So you have an insight, you have something clicks in, and then you take your photograph, you do it. Okay, then you look. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, pwede palang ganito. Then you evaluate. Okay, yeah, hey, this will look okay. Yeah, pwede na to, pwede na to. That's your evaluation. And then you take the photo. You implement. And the great thing is because after you after you do this, you actually go back here to insight or you go back to evaluation, and this becomes like a loop. So some of you will take multiple shots of the same object and only show me the best one. Some of you will say, ang pangit. That's evaluation. And then you'll try again. You'll probably have to go back to preparation and do another object, put things together. So that's the process. Now this was what, a 3-minute activity, um, just within arm's reach. But whether it's this kind of activity or something bigger, you're always going through this 5-step process. So when we're talking about creativity, the process, the thinking, how do you distill that in yourself? First of all, learn through collaboration. Okay, collaboration. School education, especially basic education, grade school and high school, has always taught us to work alone. We have to learn how to work with others. Next, if you want to be creative, do something you love. Even if it's mababaw, do something you love, because then it allows you to open up, because then you stop thinking about it and you just start doing. Find inspiration outside. Look out the window, take a walk, breathe fresh air, unplug. Do not rely on everything electronic. Stop going to Pinterest for ideas. Then remember, one of the key aspects of creativity is energy. So walk, move around. Okay? Move, get the blood flowing. Then you can also try setting the mood. Some people like to have everything in place before they move. Other people want music, candlelight, lighting. Do that. And this one's really fun also. Pick a terrible idea. You want to be creative? Start with a really terrible idea. Gagawa ako ng sinigang na sardinas. Oh my God, that sounds like a terrible idea. It sounds like it's going to really suck. Start there. Then try to figure out how to not make it suck. Diba? It might fail, but that's where we're talking about creativity here. You know, how do you churn out, how do you get things going? And these are some of the techniques that you can do. In the workplace or in the team setting, what can you do? Okay, and this is especially for people with who work in a team or have people under them. Foster an environment of creativity. Okay, give people the tools and techniques to come up with new ideas. So don't just say that, oh, we'll be creative, but you're not giving them opportunities or materials to be creative. Okay. Also, make sure that people understand what the goals of the company are, or the goals of the team. What are we going for? What are we trying to achieve? So that once everybody's on the same page, then everybody starts to come up with ideas that feed into it. But if somebody thinks that we're trying to paint the wall, but the rest of the team pala understands is that you're supposed to mop the floor, then the person who wants to paint the wall is thinking differently. So make sure that everybody understands what the goals are, what the products are, what's important for the team. Okay? Create collaborative environments, not negative environments that when somebody comes up with an idea, ay, ano ba yan, pangit? No. Make sure people feel that it's okay for them to come up with ideas, that they're not being judged for them or they're not being shut down. And if an idea works, reward people, recognize people, celebrate successes, because then it reinforces this concept that ideas get rewarded, or good ideas or good ideas that work get rewarded. So those are the techniques that you can have in place for the workplace, which now leads us to this concept of innovation. Okay, we're going to step lively now, ladies and gentlemen. Innovation. So this whole, yet another corny cliche. Oh, innovative tayo. What's innovation? Innovation is a new idea, creative thought, imagination in the form of a device or method. So an innovation does not have to be always an object. It can be a method or a process. It's often viewed as an application of better solution that meets new requirements, unarticulated needs, or existing market needs. Look at this definition. Meets new requirements, unarticulated needs, or existing market needs. Unarticulated needs. Needs that are not spoken, but it's there, right? For instance, um, the invention of the wheel. Okay, yes, but why was it invented, or why, or let's move forward. Uh, the car, the invention of the car, of the motor car. That's an innovation. But what was the need? The need for people to mobilize, to move themselves. But what's unarticulated? Without having to worry about the horse, because the horse itself was the biggest factor. You had to have a horse. You had to be able to feed it. It had to be healthy. It had to be able to pull the carriage. And there are times that the horse was not able to. So the innovation of the motor vehicle took out the need for the horse. But people did not say, I need a faster horse. They were saying, I needed a more efficient way to travel from point A to point B. And the person that was able to innovate said, I'm not going to build you a faster horse. I'm going to build you a car. Okay? See the difference? The innovative person did not say, I will build you a faster horse. The innovative person said, I will build you another object that can get you from point A to point B faster. But let's look about innovations, because we're talking about unarticulated needs. This is the Bluetooth pet rock. Oh, the following objects are real, huh? They're all real. The pet rock is a phenomenon from the late 1960s. And as the name implies, it's a pet rock. Bato siya. It did absolutely nothing, but it was one of these quirky, stupid toys that became all the rage in the 1960s. That you had a pet rock. It was basically a stone that you treated like a pet. People would buy houses for it or build little houses for it. It had a bed, it had a name, and all of that for your pet rock. Now, modern man, in all of his brilliance, has come up with a Bluetooth-enabled pet rock. You know what it does? Absolutely nothing. But it's Bluetooth-enabled. Isn't that lovely? All right. So, is this an innovation? Or is this, what's the value here? What does this do? Yes, it's an invention. Yes, it uses technology. Yes, it's something different and it's creative. Somebody creative came up with this stupidity. But what does it do? There is no value. There's nothing. Okay? This next object, it's called the QCAT barcode scanner. This was a failed toy invention. And basically what happened was, this is a real thing also. This object, it's a barcode scanner, and you scanned barcodes in a magazine, or in a magazine, and it took you to the website of that product. Yeah, that's all it did. It took it, and it failed because this company, Digital Convergence, was trying to sell it as a service to advertisers. That, you know when people scan your magazine or scan your barcode, it will take them to your website. Galing. But again, why did not subscribe? People did not have to. It did not catch on. Why? Because, do you really need to scan a barcode to go to a website? Really? Seriously? And remember, this is early 2000s, late 90s technology, so it was connected to a computer. This was not wireless. So you had to have your magazine or something beside your computer if you wanted to use this. Again, useless. Creative, yes. Was it an innovation? Did it meet any unarticulated needs? No. Yes. The Smith& Wesson bicycle, developed by gun manufacturer Smith& Wesson for law enforcement. Yeah, so these were police bicycles produced by the people that made police handguns. Galing, right? All that. Seriously, does anybody need, what makes a Smith& Wesson bicycle different from a Schwinn or from a Giant? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So it failed. because there was no value. There was no value in buying a Smith and Wesson bicycle to do something that any other bicycle would do. There was nothing special in there. How does this make this a law enforcement bicycle? Kasi bagay siya sa baril ko, matching, di ba? This is fashion show. And what if you're using a Glock? Oh, immediately then they're not matching anymore, and there are no Glock bicycles. So this is a failed innovation. Watermelon Oreos. This is a real thing, a watermelon Oreo. Some idiot came up with, hey, what if, let's try this out. Watermelon flavored Oreos. It failed miserably. And Colgate beef lasagna. Colgate wanted to diversify its product line, so it came out with ready-to-eat frozen food. Pop it in the microwave and you have your dinner. So why did it fail? It didn't fail because it tasted bad. It failed because people refused to try it because they were afraid it would taste like toothpaste. Kadiri, di ba? So when we're talking about innovation, innovation is not about just the technology. It's not just necessarily product related. It's not for big companies. It can also be for small companies, for small groups, for teams. It's not about a person or a department. And it's not just about doing something new. Just because something is new doesn't mean that it's innovative. Okay? Innovations don't have to be expensive. Although misplaced or badly thought of innovations can be expensive for a company, okay, or for a person. And innovation is not just for creative people. It's very important to know. And it's not incremental, which means an innovation happens, bam, boom. You don't step by step an innovation. You implement it. And the innovation is never just the end to itself. It is always part of something bigger. Or you always start with the innovation and then you build from there. When we're talking about innovation, we have to see it through these three lenses. First of all, is it humanly desirable? Or do people want to use it? Is it something that people want to use? Is it financially viable? Innovation might sound really fantastic, but can people afford it? Or can we afford to make it? Okay. And last, is it technologically and organizationally feasible? It's one thing to come up with a brilliant idea of how to change, for example, the school system. But does the organization, for example, the educational system in the country, does it allow us to do that kind of innovation? Is the technology to do it? Oh, let's just teleport people from point A to point B. Yes, but is the technology available? So all of these three things have to come together. Desirability, viability, and feasibility have to come together to create and to cause what we know as an innovation, right? And uh, one of these processes, okay, is going through a process. Nga, one of these methods of achieving innovation is going through a process. And one of these processes is, for example, is called the design thinking process. And in the design thinking process, look at the steps. You empathize, you understand what the problem is and who you're doing the problem for. You define the problem. You define what the objective is. You ideate, you come up with ideas. You prototype, which means you make your idea physical, and then you test it out. Okay, so this design thinking process is just one of the methods, one of the many methods that you can create innovation. Again, let's go back to what I earlier said. Creative thinkers are disciplined. There is a process. They trust in the process. And the design thinking process is just one of those ways of creating innovations and being creative. But this is very important. Don't think that it's just a matter of coming up with something new. Cool tech without customer value is not innovation, it's just invention. Again, tech without value is just invention. There has to be value. That's where we go back to those lenses: viability, feasibility, and desirability. There has to be a value for that customer, for that person who wants to use it. What do you get out of it? So it's an innovation. The personal computer, for instance, was was a great invention. Okay, but what allowed Mac, a personal computer, the Apple Mac, to really take off? It was the graphical user interface.
because there was a value. Now suddenly the personal computer, the PC, became very personal because now a non-computer person could use it because it did not require you to understand code, which was a problem with the Microsoft DOS platform. It required you to type in commands. The innovation, the true innovation of the Mac was the graphical user interface. So that was the value. That was the innovation that just changed the landscape of personal computing. Customer value. All right. So I'm now going towards we're starting to wrap up soon. We're going to be on the down slope now. Now let's think about thinking inside the box. We've been talking about creativity and innovation throughout this morning's lecture. And uh, there's there's this thinking inside us. There's this default that, oh, think out of the box, think out of the box, think out of the box. I'm saying that's bullshit. Stop thinking out of the box. Why? It doesn't work. It simply doesn't work. The box is there for a reason. But of course, what are we now? But now before, okay, I'm going to start thinking of cliches now. No, it's not that. It's just that stop thinking that you can create that the solutions to your problems, that the creative solutions to problems is something far-fetched, spaceships and teleportation and holograms. Start thinking inside the box. This is kasi what happens. Our brains, naturally, this is physiological, uh, always relies on patterns and structure to remove the burden of thinking, to make things easier for us. And our brains do this naturally. Okay, they rely on patterns so that it eases the burden from our processing. It makes things easier for us to think, to process. The problem is because our brain immediately goes into a pattern. When you're given a an anything, you're given a wide range. That process of going into pattern thinking is what is it brings us into what's called an associative rut. A rut is just like this. Yeah, these are ruts. It's a groove, and the human mind will usually default into that rut. Basically, if I start saying, um, for instance, come up with 5 objects that are white, and most of you would start coming up with 5 objects that are white, right? Okay. What if I say, uh, what if I say gray, large, mammal, tusk? What is that? Gray, large, mammal, tusk. What is that? Somebody punch it into the chat. Gray, mammal, large, tusk. Elephant. Okay. What if I told you it was a walrus? Because a walrus is large, it's gray, it's a mammal, and it has tusks. The narwhal is large, gray, it's mammal, and it's tusks. That's the thing. That's the thing about this associative rut. Your mind, because of that pattern, goes bam. It will start narrowing in and going to that rut and give you elephant, 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 elephant. And elephant now is the box. Elephant now is the cliche. Elephant now is that. So all solutions, if the problem is to come up with something that is gray mammalian, large and tusk and has a tusk, you immediately go, the default goes into elephant, and you stop being creative. Because when you're given the freedom, when your mind is given the freedom to come up with anything, our brains will focus on the most conventional. Then that's scientific. That's psychological. When your mind is given the chance to say anything or to do anything, you will always go to the most conventional, to the cliche, to the default. Scary, no? When you're given a chance, if I gave you a blank wall to paint anything you want, you will actually paint something that is already default with you, your standard thing, your usual thing. Because you can do anything. And your mind goes to the, actually does not go into the anything mode. Your mind goes into cliche, goes into default. Um, for people that speak a foreign language, okay, have you ever had anybody say, "Uy, say something"? For example, you're in the US, you're somewhere and you have a foreigner friend. "Uy, say something. You're Filipino pala. Can you say something in Filipino?" What do you say? You're suddenly like, you don't know what to say. I used to get that a lot. Oh, you know how to speak Spanish? Say something in Spanish. What do you say? Because you go try to go into the most conventional. Usually puro curse words, exactly. Because that's the most conventional. It's not being creative. Diba? Um, if you're a creative person and somebody goes up to you, "Uy, can you come up, isipan mo naman ako ng project ko, isipan mo naman ng idea for a film mo. Isipan mo ako ng idea for an app." Because your brains will always focus on the more conventional. What I'm saying now is let's move out from that. Use constraints. Constraints. Constraints are limits. This is the box. Create your box. There is what's called the theory of constraints. And this is the process, okay, which I will go to in a second, in a little bit. Create constraints. Give yourself a box. Create the boundaries of the box so that you can now be creative. There are lots of these, you've probably seen these online. A sad story in 6 words. Diba? 6 words, and you say a story. A very sad story. Or a scary story in 5 words. That's the constraint. 5 words. Scary story. So this is now how you work with constraints. First of all is you identify the constraint. What is it that's keeping me, that I want to use to limit? 6 words. Okay, 6 words. So it becomes clear, right? Every 7 is wrong, 5 is wrong. 6 words. Exploit the constraint. So you start hitting the wall. You start banging against the wall. You start to break out of that box, of that constraint, of that 6 words. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Too much. Cut down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Pwede pa. One more word. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Pwede. So you're exploiting it. You're pushing the boundary of that constraint. Then you go into and you subordinate everything else to that constraint, which means that don't think about the other stuff first. Think of the constraint first. Focus on the constraint. Make that your limiting factor. Okay? And then elevate it. What do you mean by elevate it? Now that you've focused on the constraint, or you've exploited it, you've understood what it means, you bring it up. Which means that, for example, for this 6-word sad story, now that we have our 6 words, you start now tweaking those words so that it comes up with a nice story, with a good story, with a compelling sad story. You see? And when the constraint disappears, or if the constraint disappears, you repeat it. Which means that if the 6 words is no longer a constraint, because now I've got this 6-word thing going on, okay? You stop using it. You repeat the process. You identify a new constraint. You see how it works? Now, does it have to always be like this? No. They're different things. In fact, I'd like to think that I am very pasaway, and that's probably one good way of thinking about being creative and using constraints is being pasaway, not allowing the system, the world, to say no, because finding a way when there is no way. Case in point, for instance, and some of my students would know this, the concept of the perfect project, right? The concept of the perfect project, you only get a 4 or a 0. And somebody said long ago that it was not possible, that people would fail, that students would fail and not achieve it. So I use that constraint. Okay, this is the constraint. This is going to be the limitation. This is what you can do and what you cannot do. And I said, okay, this is what I can do also as a teacher and not do as a teacher. So I exploited those constraints. I pushed against the wall. I understood the nature of the wall, understood the nature of the box. And then I found, okay, I subordinated it and I elevated it. Okay, find a way to really challenge the students by giving them by creating a way where they can fail and where they will most probably fail, but there is a way out of failure. So I came up with that project, and I came up with the perfect project. The system. I came up with the rules for the perfect project. What can you do? What can you not do? How do you make it? How do you give them? How do you make it a failure point for them, but gives them a way out when they do certain things? And when that constraint disappeared, I now came up with another way of doing other kinds of projects. Okay, so constraints, using, creating your box, using the limitations of the system of what exists in the walls of your environment, of the boxes that are available to us, using that as your way to think out of the box or to come up with, to be creative. Stop thinking that, oh, I have to think out of the box. No, because once you remove the boundaries of the box, once you say anything goes, then nothing happens. Put a box, create the box, create constraints. Notice the nature of the constraints that I gave. They actually make drawing very difficult. And this is now where this creativity comes in. How do I find a way? But for those that tried it, whether you showed it up here on screen or not, you're able to draw a face. So it's not impossible. And that's this concept of constraints is, when you have to create something, it may sound impossible at the beginning, but when you start to understand the nature of the constraint, then you start to realize that actually you're very flexible. Uh, think of it as paano ba to? Ingredients in cooking. Okay, uh, let's say you're going to make bread. You're going to make a dessert or something. You can make bread with as little as 3 ingredients, if I'm not mistaken. Diba? Flour, water, sugar. Or flour, water, and egg. You can already create some sort uh, of something. So, once na ito lang ang meron ako, and you understand that that's all you have, because those are your limits, those are your constraints, then you're able to really break out. But if you're given a much larger set of variables, and then you're just going to go to town, you're not going to think of it in terms of constraints, then you're actually becoming less creative. So understand the nature of the box, understand the nature of the constraints, because then you become a lot more creative. Again, what Brent showed us earlier, he used the H to create the shape of the face. And that's working with the constraints, because I was like, okay, how do I use the H in creating a face? There is no H, there is no natural H in the face. So he used that as the shape of the face, and that's working out of your constraints. That's thinking within the box and using the box as your platform, as your takeoff point for creativity. All right, so we've talked about creativity. We've talked about understanding the processes to becoming creative, or how creativity is formed, and we're looking at that in the lens also of innovation, and how innovation and creativity is about creating value for someone, and then using constraints, using limitations as the basis, as a foundation for being creative. Okay, so putting the box to make us break out of it. So how do you be creative? How do you creative? How do we become creative? What is it that we do? What is it that you can do to become more creative? To be creative is to develop solutions that address problems through the use of stimuli from different influences. Okay, so you have to understand that it's about bringing in. It's about exploring, being divergent, and then converging different possible stimuli, different inputs into creating the possible. So first is you have to understand the objective and purpose. Objective and purpose, objective and purpose, objective and purpose. What is it that you want to achieve and why? Understand what it is that you want to achieve and why, not just the what, huh? Why. So um, I want to I want to paint a landscape. Why do you want to paint the landscape? I want to be able to give this sense of openness. Okay, now that you understand the objective and you understand the purpose, the what and the why, then you're able to move in that direction. But if it's just one or the other, I want to make a film that people cry. Okay, or I want people to cry. Okay, or I want to make a film. Okay, you see how bitin? It's just one half of your solution. So objective and purpose. Next up, and we've just finished doing this activity, use constraints to set you free. Understand the reason and the nature for the box and then explore its boundaries. The more adult you become, the more constraints you will be given. Company rules, school rules, work environment, adult rules, family rules. All of that are constraints, but it does not mean that just because you have constraints that you're unable to move. Explore, push the boundaries, push the edges of the box, because it's there where you're going to find solutions, creative solutions. Okay? And then collaborate. Okay? Collaborate. Work with other people. Talk to other people. And it's not only just people in your same field. Talk to people outside of the field. Talk to people who do not have vested interests in your solution. Understand what their problems are. If you're trying to create a solution, you're trying to create a solution to a problem, understand what the problem is, understand the people whose problem it is. Okay, so collaborate. Rome wasn't built in a day. No man is an island, and vice versa. Okay? Next is be multidisciplinary. I mean, I've asked this before in workshops and everything. When was the last time you actually just did one thing? Just one thing, huh? When was the last time you did just one thing? You can't even watch TV now without doing something else. You're watching TV, your phone is beside you, you're picking it up, or you're smelling something, or you're thinking of something else. When you're on the phone, you're playing a game, you're always doing something else. There's always a something else. So why should solutions also just be one-dimensional? So be multidisciplinary. It is okay to like something else, to do something else. So and bring that in, because for instance an IT what's this? And this happened for a company that I was doing a workshop for and all of that. The problem to an IT problem, the solution to an IT uh, problem was an HR solution, because they were saying that their call center agents were getting a lot of calls from their customers, a lot of abuse from the customers, and because mabagal yung results and all of that. And the only thing call center people can say was that down kasi yung server. The thing is, how can a call center agent work on or solve the server problem? That's not their domain. That's not their thing. That's an IT problem. But the problem was is that it was the call center agents that were talking to the customers. So one solution was, and the solution that they said, look at this way. What if the solution we provided for that IT issue is training our call center agents to do crisis management, to manage irate and disgruntled customers, to explain what the issues are without passing the blame on to IT. And whose responsibility is that training? HR. So it's an HR solution to an IT problem. It doesn't solve the server issue. Okay, it doesn't solve the server issue, but it solves the issue of the call center agents dealing with their customers. So be multidisciplinary. Don't be linear. Don't be narrow-minded. This one is a favorite mantra of mine, and mantra talaga siya. Okay, fail fast, fail often. Fail fast, fail often. Our successes are not fueled by, or our learning is not fueled by our successes. Mistakes are what fuels success. Now, don't just stop there, of course. Fail fast, fail often, iterate, try again. When you fail, you're not supposed to stop at the failure. You're supposed to continue. You're supposed to try again. But what I'm saying here is do not be afraid to fail fast, to fail small when you're starting. And then learn from there. Do not build the whole city. Do not build a whole house only to find out that there was a problem with the structure. Test first. Look when you're small, when it's easy to fail, when it's cheap to fail. Okay? So fail fast, fail often. And as I finish, always understand, always remember that it's not the pana, it's the Indian. It is never the pana. It's not the pana, it's the Indian. So it's you. It's not your tools, it's not your equipment, it's not how nice your camera is, it's not how bonga your school is, it's you. And the greatness, the creativity, the magic will come from you.
Freedom is a concept, acting like a dealer saying you wanna pay. It's gotta be different in style, raise that proud. Love it when you look at it way. Not believe it all around you, the ball. You're playing it because it came from the glass. The vision is a favorite song. It's all back up into your love. Pull it close. Just close your eyes, cause I'm telling you we gotta go. Want to take me home, I wanna ride. You wanna know, right? Just to nobody. Body, so body. Let me do you body. To the left,